The Los Angeles Dodgers were thrown into a state of complete shock and confusion on a day that had started with nothing but positive energy and cautious optimism. Just hours after Shohei Ohtani completed his latest round of treatment and received encouraging feedback from the medical team, something happened inside the Dodgers clubhouse that nobody had anticipated, nobody had planned for, and nobody knew how to explain. What began as a moment of quiet triumph, Ohtani walking back into the facility with renewed energy and immediately heading toward the rehabilitation training area, quickly spiraled into one of the most unexpected and talked about situations the Dodgers organization has faced all season. Voices were raised. Tensions ran high. And in a move that left every single person inside that clubhouse completely stunned, manager Dave Roberts stepped in and made a decision so dramatic, so bold, and so completely out of character that it has since sent shockwaves through the entire baseball world. Was Ohtani pushing himself too hard, too soon? What exactly did interpreter Will Ireton mean when he said he could no longer understand Ohtani's actions? And why did Dave Roberts feel it necessary to physically confiscate Ohtani's glove, and what does that decision mean for the Dodgers going forward? The answers are more complicated, and more emotionally charged, than anyone could have imagined. According to sources inside the organization, the morning had started on an incredibly positive note. Ohtani had arrived at the facility earlier than almost anyone else on the roster, which, for those who know him well, was not at all surprising. Even during the most difficult stretches of his recovery, Ohtani has consistently been among the first through the doors every single morning, long before most of his teammates have even left their homes. But this morning felt different. Those who were present described an energy around Ohtani that they had not seen in weeks. There was a lightness to his step, a quiet confidence in his expression, that told everyone who saw him that he had turned a corner. The treatment had clearly had an impact. And Ohtani, being the kind of competitor he is, was not prepared to waste a single moment. Within minutes of arriving, he had changed into his training gear and made his way directly to the rehabilitation area. Staff members who were already on site reported that Ohtani began warming up with an intensity that immediately caught their attention. He was not easing back in. He was not testing the waters carefully. He was pushing, hard, from the very first moment he set foot in that space. Teammates who filtered in throughout the morning and caught glimpses of Ohtani's session described what they saw with a mixture of awe and concern. Freeman said later that when he walked past the rehabilitation area and saw what Ohtani was doing, his first reaction was complete disbelief. He said it looked less like a rehabilitation session and more like a full-intensity preparation for game day. He said he stood there for a moment just watching, unsure whether to be inspired or worried. Betts echoed similar feelings, saying that Ohtani's drive and determination are qualities that every player on the roster deeply admires. But he also admitted that what he witnessed that morning made him wonder whether even the most dedicated athlete in the world sometimes needs someone to pump the brakes. It was Will Ireton, Ohtani's longtime interpreter and one of the people closest to him within the organization, who first stepped forward to address the situation directly. Those present described the exchange between Ireton and Ohtani as tense, emotional, and completely unlike anything they had ever witnessed between the two men. Ireton, who is widely regarded within the Dodgers organization as someone who understands Ohtani better than almost anyone else, approached him during a brief pause in his training session and expressed his concerns directly and openly. According to witnesses, Ireton told Ohtani clearly and firmly that he could not understand his actions. He said that after everything Ohtani had been through, the weeks of treatment, the careful management of his knee, the decision to sit out the All-Star game, it made no sense to him why Ohtani would immediately throw himself into training at this level of intensity without giving his body the time it needed to properly adjust. Ohtani's response, according to those who were close enough to hear, was calm but equally firm. He reportedly told Ireton that he understood the concern but that he knew his own body better than anyone else. He said that for him, inactivity was more damaging than training. He said that the moment he stops moving, stops working, stops pushing, that is when the real problems begin, both physically and mentally. The disagreement between the two men reportedly continued for several minutes, drawing the quiet attention of nearly everyone in the vicinity. Players pretended to focus on their own work while straining to follow what was unfolding just a short distance away. Coaches exchanged glances. Staff members slowed their movements, none of them wanting to miss a single word. Ireton, sources say, became increasingly emotional as the conversation continued. Those who know him describe Ireton as someone who carries a deep, genuine concern for Ohtani's well-being that goes far beyond the professional responsibilities of his role. He was not speaking as an interpreter in that moment. He was speaking as someone who cares deeply about the person standing in front of him, and who was genuinely frightened by what he was seeing. He reportedly told Ohtani directly that he had watched him push through pain and pressure for years without ever asking for help, without ever admitting that things were harder than he was letting on. He said that this time, the stakes were too high. He said that this time, he needed Ohtani to listen, not as his interpreter, not as his colleague, but as someone who has stood beside him through everything and who was asking him, plainly and honestly, to slow down. The room was absolutely silent by the time Ireton finished speaking. And then Dave Roberts walked in. Sources confirmed that Roberts had been informed of the situation by a staff member who had grown concerned about the escalating tension in the rehabilitation area. Roberts arrived quickly, assessed what was happening with a single sweeping look around the room, and moved with deliberate, purposeful calm toward the center of the situation. What happened next has since been described by virtually everyone who witnessed it as one of the most dramatic moments they have ever seen inside a professional sports facility. Without raising his voice. Without lengthy explanation. Without any of the diplomatic carefully measured language that managers typically use when navigating sensitive situations involving star players, Roberts reached down, picked up Ohtani's glove from the bench where it had been placed, and held it firmly in his hand. He looked directly at Ohtani. And he told him, simply and without any room for debate, that training for the day was over. The silence that followed was described as total and absolute. Nobody in that room moved. Nobody spoke. Every set of eyes was fixed on the two men standing at the center of the rehabilitation area, the manager and his superstar, facing each other in a moment that felt like it carried the weight of the entire season behind it. Ohtani held Roberts' gaze for a long moment. Those who were watching said they could see the conflict playing out across his expression, the competitor in him resisting, the rational part of him processing, the exhausted part of him slowly beginning to understand. And then, quietly, he nodded. Roberts placed the glove under his arm, put a firm hand on Ohtani's shoulder, and guided him toward the exit of the rehabilitation area. As they walked, sources say Roberts spoke quietly to Ohtani in a tone that was not angry, not confrontational, but deeply serious and unmistakably caring. He reportedly told Ohtani that the Dodgers needed him, not for today, not for this week, but for the long stretch of the season that still lay ahead. He said that protecting him now was the only way to guarantee that he would be standing on that field when it truly mattered. Freeman, watching from across the room, later said that the moment Roberts picked up that glove, he understood exactly what was happening. He said it was not a punishment. It was not a power move. It was a manager doing the hardest part of his job, protecting a player from himself. Roberts addressed reporters after the session and confirmed that Ohtani's rehabilitation schedule had been adjusted following the morning's events. He said the medical team, Ireton, and he himself had all been aligned on the same concern and that the decision to intervene had been made collectively and with Ohtani's long-term health as the only priority. He said Ohtani had received the decision with maturity and full understanding, and that he expected him back at the facility the following morning, ready to begin a carefully structured and properly paced return to full activity. Ireton, speaking briefly to a small group of reporters outside the facility, said only that he hoped people understood that everything that had happened that day came from a place of genuine love and respect for Shohei as a person, not just as a player. As for Ohtani himself, he left the facility that afternoon without speaking to the media. But those who saw him walk to his car described his expression not as frustrated or defeated, but as quietly, deeply settled. Like a man who had just been reminded, in the most human way possible, that the people around him were not just colleagues. They were family. Thank you for watching. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Subscribe to our channel for more interesting and up-to-date information.